Hi everybody, I'm Babs Hogan and welcome to Victory Cheese Clips. Today's guest is Courtney Johnson, who is the Executive Director for the Washington State Cheesemakers Association. So welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, this is a very short interview, so let's get started. How did you become the Executive Director?
Yeah, we had a search process. WASCA recently opened up the position for a part-time executive director paid position. And there was a search process last summer to find someone to fill that niche. I applied for it, went through the process, and got the job.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Okay, so the pandemic has hit a lot of people really hard. It's put a lot of businesses out of business. In other words, they just closed the doors, sadly. And it did hit the dairy industry pretty hard. So tell us what your state did to save the cheesemakers and the retailers.
Yes. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, when everything was kind of in free fall, the Cheesemakers Association banded together. We're a pretty tight-knit community here in Washington, even though there are about 50 licensed cheesemakers, 20 of whom are association members. And we put together a campaign called Save Our Cheesemakers for social media and for the cheesemakers to use on their websites to help promote the cheese. And then the association also worked with a couple of local retailers to get local cheese promos for the cheeses that they had. The retailers, of course, were selling mostly commodity cheeses at that point. And so they needed that extra bump to get more local cheese sales. And some of the retailers also, we worked with them to get them to bring in more local cheeses, which paid off. Sales for artisan cheeses ended up going up throughout the year in Washington. And then at this point, everybody who is on the smaller scale is actually selling out on a pretty consistent basis. It's really hard to get local cheese right now because there's, it's all being purchased.
Well, that's fantastic news. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So did you find that you really had to think out of the box almost instantly?
I think so. I wasn't actually on the board of WASCA at that point because I didn't get hired until August. But as someone who works in retail, we really struggled to figure out how to make sure that we were supporting our local creameries. In my shop, we actually ended up getting rid of all of the competing cheeses. We sold out of them and we didn't reorder. And so if we only had local Chev, that was all we had. If we only had local cheddar in the cheese case, that was all we had. And that was kind of how we were able to adapt to it. Yeah. The creameries had to, go to, they didn't have farmers markets anymore. So they ended up having to sell in a parking lot or build an online store when they didn't have one. And the association tried the best that they could to help develop the resources and make sure that everybody had what they need so that they could do those things. Everybody was kind of learning at the same time as we went and trying to be really supportive of one another.
I read your blog about Lynn Swanson and her story about the COVID and how it affected her business. And it was a very well written article and it made me really sad.
Yeah, thank you.
It has to be told.
Yeah, no, I touched base with her recently and things are much better over there. It was really scary. We went, my business partner and I went and visited her just right when they announced the closure of the farmers markets. And she, I just made a big batch of yogurt. What am I going to do? So now she's actually able to have those sales. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who are still struggling. Like there absolutely are. But in general, the tide has really turned to a more positive note.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Courtney, you're doing great work. I want to compliment you on not only your writing, but also what you're doing within your state, and hopefully other people will follow. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of Victory Cheese Clips, and I hope you'll continue to thrive and do well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.